Hello everyone, welcome to History and Culture. From ancient times, heroes have loved beautiful women. Whether they were nobles or commoners, they all liked beautiful women, especially the emperors of ancient times. As the rulers of the entire world, they had the highest status and the greatest power. As the emperor, they had the 3 palaces and 6 courts, and the harem was the gathering place of the world's beauties. Even if the emperor did not value female beauty, the concubines who were qualified to become empresses were also very outstanding in appearance and talent. With the emperor's great power, he could select the women he liked according to his own wishes. Although the women who could catch the emperor's eye all had very high looks, was the real situation really like that? Compared with the concubines of other dynasties, the concubines of the Qing dynasty were an exception. From the photos of some concubines passed down from the Qing dynasty, it can be seen that the concubines of the Qing dynasty were very ugly. Why was this? In fact, the reason is very simple because there was a rule in their ancestors that even the emperor had to abide by. The reason why the concubines in the Qing dynasty's harem were so ugly was mainly due to the special system of selecting concubines at that time. The Qing dynasty was a dynasty ruled by ethnic minorities and implemented the 8 banners system. Later, with the continuous development of the Qing dynasty, a series of adjustments were made, and the internal hierarchical system of the Qing dynasty was also very strict, dividing people into the 8 banners and the 3 flags of the imperial household department, with different identities and statuses, and different rights and treatment. Moreover, in order to consolidate the rule of the imperial power, there were also various restrictions on the Han people. For example, in the selection of concubines by the emperor, the selected beauties were all from the 8 banners. Especially for the high-ranking concubines in the harem, they were basically 8 banners women. Han women were not eligible to become concubines. Even if the emperor liked them, their status would not be very high. Compared with Han people, the status of the Manchu 8 banners was very noble. In ancient times, marriage emphasized the matching of families. The emperor's marriage was also for political considerations. Therefore, the selection of concubines was mainly from these 8 banners nobles to balance the various forces in the court. Compared with these, appearance was not so important. Moreover, the rulers of the Qing dynasty attached great importance to the purity of bloodlines. In order to maintain the nobility of the Manchu bloodline, they were not willing to intermarry with the Han people, considering it as an insult to their bloodline. Marriage between the 8 banners of the Qing dynasty was mostly through intermarriage. Especially as an emperor, selecting consorts was done within the 8 banners, reducing the scope of selection. Even if someone was tall among the short, they were still short. These 8 banners women were not particularly attractive, so even if they were carefully selected, no goddess-level figures would be chosen. Compared to their looks, Qing rulers valued the status and position of these women. For them, only women from the 8 banner nobility were of noble blood and qualified to become imperial consorts. They believed that overly beautiful women were troublemakers, and if not careful, they could make people addicted and affect the development of imperial power. To prevent this kind of thing, Qing nobles were unwilling to let beautiful women become legitimate wives and could only become concubines. In ancient times, marriage emphasized the will of the parents and the words of the matchmaker. Ancient marriages were also arranged marriages. Even if it was a Manchu prince, they did not have an absolute say in marriage. They had to obey the arrangements of their elders, even though they were princes, and their mothers arranged their marriages. As mothers, they did not want their sons to marry a beautiful woman because they believed it would bring disaster. Therefore, when selecting a queen for their son, they would try to choose a virtuous and gentle woman and avoid selecting a coquettish and alluring woman, fearing that the prince would be distracted and affect their work. Therefore, the reason why Qing princes and emperors' consorts were so ugly was ultimately due to a rule passed down from their ancestors. Choosing a spouse must pay attention to the match of social status, and only those noble women were qualified to become consorts. Bloodline and status were the most important. Because the marriage of ancient emperors was a true political marriage, Each consort selection was a way for aristocratic families and the emperor to consolidate their positions. Princes or emperors did not have absolute freedom, especially in the matter of choosing a spouse. Ancient marriages emphasized the importance of social status, and not looks. Therefore, the position of the legitimate wife always belonged to the woman who was a match socially, not the beautiful one. Just like Emperor Kangxi, who ascended to the throne at the age of only 8, and was still a child. In order to consolidate his position and strengthen his power when he assumed full control at the age of 14, he had to marry Heshli, the granddaughter of his regent, Soni, to secure his position. Whether Heshli was beautiful or not was not a consideration for Emperor Kangxi. This is the dilemma of being an emperor. Even though they wield the power of life and death over the world, they still have to carefully consider certain decisions, as touching the interests of certain noble families can make the atmosphere in the court more mysterious and difficult to predict. As for the so-called 3,000 beauties in the harem, it is a generalization. Although there were indeed beautiful women in the emperor's harem, they were not the majority. The aesthetic standards of ancient times were not much different from today. For example, in the Tang dynasty, plump women were considered beautiful, while in the Han dynasty, thinness was the ideal. These are just a few examples of the changing aesthetic standards throughout history. However, our aesthetic preferences have always been moving in the same direction. Another reason why the photos of the Qing dynasty concubines that have been passed down to us are not attractive is that all the photos from the late Qing period were in black and white. This color scheme naturally gives people a serious feeling, making it more difficult to showcase beauty. Moreover, photography technology at that time was focused on realism, so poor photography skills were also an important factor. Also, there were no cosmetics available to assist during photography sessions, so these women's appearances were entirely based on their natural beauty. Therefore, it was normal for them to look average in their photos. In fact, when we look at old photos from the end of the Qing dynasty, the beauty of the subjects is not the main focus of our observation. Instead, we are transported back to a time of feudal society and turmoil. If these women had lived in modern society, they would surely not have looked as plain in their photographs. These old photos show us a more realistic portrayal of life, allowing us to understand that even the noble families of the palace and the concubines of the harem were just ordinary people with flesh and blood, living in a colorful world. This is History and Culture Channel. Likes and subscriptions are the greatest help and support for us. Thank you everyone. See you next time.